My name is Meira Blaustein. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Woodstock Film Festival. And this is the last day of the festival. Anybody in this room have attended some of the other events in previous? Thank you. It's been a great festival. So many amazing filmmakers, so many amazing films, really, really sense of community also. So many of the filmmakers supporting each other and lifting each other up. It's been beautiful to witness. It's been beautiful to be a part of it from my own vantage point. And here we are now. You are about to hear from, two legends. One of them I have known for literally 25 years, because Barbara Kopple, 2 times Academy Award-winning filmmakers who made probably about 50 films, has every year at the festival, with the exception of one, I don't remember which, but every other year she has been at the festival either showing her film, being on a jury, or doing a panel, doing something. So Barbara, it's such a wonderful, it's an honor to have you back. And you know how much I love you. David Amram, I have gotten to know only, it's been, I think, maybe at the most a year. I have been to his bar mitzvah. You know, he waited a few years, but he did it. He is such a legend in the music world, in the film world, and the stories that this person has, you could sit here for hours, but you don't have that much time. So really make the most of what's to come in the next hour or so, and it is my great pleasure to invite David Amram and Barbara Kopple to join us here. And if it's okay with you, before I disappear, David, come sit here. David, come sit here first. We're just going to take a quick photo. So just bear with us for a second or two, because I'm going to be here with these 2 wonderful people. I'm going to put my microphone down. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, David. Thank you all for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. And I'm so happy to be here and see all these seats filled on a Sunday. And I can't imagine why you wouldn't be here, because the great David Amram is here. David, to me, is one of the most sensational human beings. He's so inclusive. He makes people feel as if they can do anything. He gives you so much confidence. And when he does something spectacular, he's very, very humble. He works with musicians as partners, and he works with directors and really wants to know what their visions are for the music that he does. And I'm just my heart is going so fast because I'm here with such a master. And for many of you who don't know him, I'm going to do something I usually never do, which is to read an introduction, but I sort of scribbled it because I want you to get a fullness and an understanding of all of the accomplishments, all the people he's worked with, many of the people he's worked with, his touring, his composing, his conducting at Carnegie Hall. I mean, the list goes on and on. 3 memoirs that he's written, and he's touring right now, right? All over the world. So I'm gonna stop and read this a little bit. If I can open the glass case. David Amram has been breathing life into his work for over 75 years, from his jazz poetry accompaniments for Jack Kerouac. It was almost as if you would have a conversation back and forth with the two of you. Jack would say a line, and maybe you'd be on the piano or the French horn or something like that. He has collaborations with folk, country, jazz icons, Willie Nelson, Bob Dylan, Betty Carter, Charlie Mingus, Dizzy Gillespie, Arlo Guthrie, Sonny Rollins, Pete Seeger, Patti Smith, Odetta, Peter Yarrow. He grew up a little bit in Philly and also on a farmland in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Yes? Okay. In a home of classical records, Jewish scholarship and culture, along with his interest in Latin and indigenous American folk music, influences his classical jazz, folk, and chamber music, which David continues to do with ingenuity, love, and respect. His uncle played a very big part in his life, in his early life, taking him to see Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. Tell me if I'm wrong here. Okay, David's scores include 25 Joseph Papp theater productions, including the New York Shakespeare Festival and Shakespeare in the Park. David has composed over 100 orchestra and chamber works, many at the New York Philharmonic, after he was picked by Leonard Bernstein as their first composer in residence. He formed partnerships with legendary directors and filmmakers, Robert Frank, Alfred Leslie, John Frankenheimer, Ilya Kazan, and many more, where he composed Pull My Daisy, The Manchurian Candidate, Splendor in the Grass, which we'll be so blessed to hear selections of today. Each score shows the vitality of David's musical talent, turning the paranoia of the Manchurian Candidate to a key, turning the improvisation of Pull My Daisy's script into a score that feels on the spot. And Splendor in the Grass, the beautiful strings, the love melodies. I have to say that I knew David, I guess 30 years ago. He probably doesn't remember, but I used to go, I think, to Beacon, and you would have Amram Jam in Beacon, and I would go and play the spoons. And I also remember there was a fire there, and the house burned down, and all of us just got together and gave money and did everything we possibly could to help you in any way that we could. And from that moment, when I was doing that, I wanted more than anything in the world to be able to work with you. And so I took a deep breath and asked you if you would compose for me my film, New Homeland. And New Homeland is a film about 5 young boys from Syria and from Iran who just witnessed war, death, their families being killed, and having then to separate to their families and going to Canada. There was a camp called Pathways that took them in for 2 or 3 weeks, along with American boys and Canadian boys. And 6 of the days, at the camp, they would go what they called tripping. I call it camping. And, and they would learn so much about how to survive and how to put up tents and how to paddle canoes and how to interact with each other. And I asked David to do the composing, and he looked at it, and one scene for me that meant so much was the boys finally coming together, and they all stood on a hilltop and jumped into the water together, screaming like just regular kids who hadn't gone through so much trauma. And David was so beautiful with the music. He did piano, intimate piano notes. I don't know if you remember. And then you put it into sort of an orchestral bomb that just blew up. And as they jumped in, it was just magnificent. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Also, the way that you work with people. I mean, when you work with, musicians, they're your partners. When you work with directors, you want to see their vision. You don't start composing until you've really felt what the scene is about and what's happening. All right. Your singular talent, a brilliant musician whose career is full of achievements. Many musicians would just like to do one of the things that you do. And yet he has constantly become more of an artist every time. David's collaborations transforms his impassioned Amram jams, and he's often joined by his 3 children, who are all artists in their own right, playing with him, beautifully playing with him, multi-instrumental, singer-songwriter, comedian. They're just beautiful kids. The title of multi-instrumental understates his abilities. David can pluck an instrument off the wall and give you an Amram jam that opens your heart, opens your heart to what music can be. His music moves me almost as much as his friendship. And we are all very lucky to be in his presence today. David is traveling. David played Wednesday at Carnegie Hall. David has written 3 memoirs. I mean, I could go on and on, but now that you have a sense and a feeling of who I'm sitting next to, I'm happy. So I wanted to just ask you one question before, we got started, which is, what's the difference doing a score for a film than it is for a concert or orchestral work?
Well, filmmaking is still an art form. All of you know that come here because you come to see it as something beautiful and meaningful that can change people's lives all over the world. Even if there are no subtitles, you could see a good film and still have a sense of what the story is about. So when you're writing a film score, I think that film scoring is also an art. However, the business of film making is so far removed that while we read in the Hollywood Reporter and all those other magazines, the word integrity, sincerity, artistic validity is in every sentence. But when you actually work for most of the people, you find out that the last thing that they're interested in is the film itself. And after I did the score for the Manchurian Candidate, which I loved, I was taken by John Frankenheimer, who was the director, as a 29-year-old, tagging along with him as sort of I guess you'd say protege, whatever.
Put it closer.
And I think,
Put the mic closer.
I think basically it was as if he was bringing a dog to the meeting, because you could bring a dog along and say things that you wouldn't want other people to hear and assume that if it's a dog, it's not intelligent enough to remember what was being said and tell other people about that. So when someone said, wow, this film's been $50 million over budget, and I don't think they're ever going to get, someone way in the back said, is it any good? Then there was a pause, and the person who was offended said, what the blank, for the benefit of women and children, the 19th century mentality, even though our president uses all those words now too, what the blank has that got to do with it? And I said, man, I'm in the wrong place. Because I saw if people making the film don't love it as much as people who are writing the score for it do, or the actors, or the cinematographers, or the editors, or the people who get everybody together, or the people who get you a sandwich when you're starving, or whatever their role is. Everybody is part of a temporary, incredible community of artists working for one another, and that everything of any validity is that way. So when I did the film scores back in 1960, I'm going to show a brief example of a minute or so of each of a few of them. And The Manchurian Candidate in 1962, I realized they were terrific movies, and they wanted some good music. They didn't want someone who had a 12-person staff of 33 ghostwriters who would do most of the work so they could go to parties and get a better gig. Therefore, I felt that it was an art to score a film, and as I probably was going to mention later on, some of the composers like Nino Rota and John Carigliano, a wonderful young American composer, and Alex North and several other people wrote wonderful music, and the great scores of Leonard Bernstein, Prokofiev, and Miles Davis were done as part of the excellence that they brought to every situation. And so when people said, film composer, I said, no, I'm a composer who occasionally writes music for films. I saw Barbara's movies. One time, you said, have you seen the one about Mike Tyson? And then you gave me nine DVDs of these incredible movies I hadn't seen. I said, wow. So when you asked me to do the music, I wanted to do it immediately. And I knew that whatever it was, it would be good. And I would hope that I'd be able to contribute something to it. And you have to sacrifice your own hot licks and your own egomania and all that stuff and try to be part of the whole. Just like when you're doing music, concert music, or conducting, you listen and you are there at the moment for what's happening and respect the sanctity of the now and take that so that even if in your imagination you're sitting in the audience seeing the film, even if it hasn't been shown, you imagine that the music can help it in some way. So you sacrifice yourself for a larger picture, because one of the big secrets is a terrific film, like all the ones Barbara's made. I haven't seen every single one, but every one I have has been wonderful. And the one I worked on with her, you could just see and feel this was really something special. It wasn't just a way to kill an afternoon or an evening. And anything, the acting, the music, the lighting, all of that was part of it. And you could be part of it too. And sometimes the film made the music better than it would have been by itself. And they always think the music is the last resort to make something that isn't happening on the screen happened. And it
Exactly.
It doesn't work that way. Otherwise, it would be a different vision of what movie music is supposed to be. So when they have something grinding away, stolen, if not from Wagner or people's whose copyrights haven't expired, and they change just enough notes not to get a copyright violation. I was told up by friends of mine who played in those orchestras that were fabulous musicians, but said it was horrible playing this junky music, not even written by the people who played it. I figured I don't want to do that. So I decided to stay on the long road, make much less money, to put it mildly, and do what I love to do and what I felt I was put here to do, and honor all the people who were letting me hang out with them and learn from them. Not only famous musicians, but people on the street who knew something I didn't know. And I call it the University of Hangoutology. I'll be 95 next month, and I still got my education from anybody and everybody that crosses my path. And today, when I saw 3 or 4 people whose schools or conducting workshops I'd been at, I was thrilled that they even remembered me, or that they got anything out of what I did so that they didn't give up. So I think that the music for the film is a gateway to the film world in a very, very special way. And it can be an art. When you see The Godfather, I've watched that, as I'm sure many of you have. Yes. For every bit of the amazing story and the acting and the scenery, but the music was done so beautifully. And the third part of The Godfather that all the critics put down because the famous director's daughter was in it, and I guess she didn't have a chance, was wonderful. And the music was extraordinary and had more opera music in it than any film I've ever seen. And there's so many chances. Prokofiev's score for film, Leonard Bernstein only wrote 1 score on The Waterfront. Is that ever beautiful? And he agreed too. He said, you know, I think if you have a gift, you don't want to waste it by entering into a world where you're supposed to grind something out in 3 weeks and they don't care what it's like. Therefore, the business part that did not leave enough time to write a really good score, to orchestrate every note, to get the good musicians to play it, to treat it like the art that the film is, was something I felt I'd rather just pass by, maybe do a few films, like the one I did for Barbara, and try to work with someone who loved what they were doing. And this film festival is all about showing a lot of films that we might not see in what's left of the movie industry's houses. But with the internet, it's a new world. And all of you who make films, I just hope to heavens you'll find a composer or a wonderful guitar player or banjo player or violinist or cellist or violist or oboe player, or someone who loves films that would like to write some music for it and give them a chance to have the opportunity to learn how to be part of the art of film scoring. And everybody does it differently, and you can have 27 different versions, and if it's a good film, it's still going to be a good film, no matter how much it may be wrecked by someone who doesn't care about it. And if it's not, it doesn't matter how good the music is, nobody's going to pay attention to it anyway.
Well, but don't you always try so hard to augment the story and not take over the story? Isn't that something very important to you?
Absolutely, because being an egomaniacal, hogging, swinish, narcissistic creep
That's not him.
It is an overcrowded field. It's an overcrowded field and a non-growth industry. And if people say to me, "You're very humble," I say, "Man, I got plenty to be humble about," because I've worked with some people that are so good. I'd never be a tenth as good as they are, but they put up with me and helped me to get better. And I think.
You want to do the clips?
Sure. This part we actually have. That's the piece they replaced with this. This says, these are talking points. This is mostly for the film makers, and hopefully you could find people to do this yourself who've never done a film score and have it be terrific for the film that you're making, not for the person you're trying to get it funded by who says, "Never heard of him, he never wrote a hit song, next." That's understandable, But the chances are they wouldn't look at your film anyway. But a lot of people will when it's done with love, with beauty, like Barbara's films. One time I went to a university and they said, "Oh, you know Barbara Kopple?" I said, "Yes, she used to come to our farm before I moved to Beacon. I lived on the farm." And and I said, "But isn't she terrific?" And they said, "Yes." She said, and she talks to everybody and encourages us all. So one of us asked, they said, "Barbara, what do you do? How, you won 2 Oscars and you're still enthusiastic and still love making films?" She said, "To make a good film, you have to be ready to die for it."
It's true. It's true.
So these are ones I did a long time ago, but each one that I selected has a different kind of instrumentation, different scene, different emotions.
And these are 3 of your favorites,
Now
right?
this one is the opening credits and the music for The Manchurian Candidate. I was sitting at the Montecito Hotel saying, "What the heck am I going to do now?" Because I had what was called a moviola in those days. You crank it and see. So I was looking at the moviola, and everything was shot out of sequence. And I looked at this one scene, is now a famous scene in all the film books I've read, where they pan around the entire circle, and what looks like a Savannah, Georgia, elegant women's tea party turns out to be a North Korean Manchurian hideout for people who have captured these soldiers and are brainwashing them. They used the word brainwash in 1962 into one of them killing his friend and a magic word. And
The Queen of Diamonds.
and rather than seeing the Queen of Diamonds, they show Frank Sinatra having a nightmare, and you hear this horrible sounding kind of music in the background, showing the fact that it was some kind of a sickness, because he was also part of the brainwashing. And while he wasn't the hired assassin, he was brainwashed into sort of remembering it. And I said to John, John, "Is this where you're going to use it?" And he said, "Well, how did it make you feel?" I said, "Man, I'm sitting here in the hotel with a blank piece of paper. I don't know what to do. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Made me feel sick to the stomach, like I was going nuts." He said, "That's what it's supposed to do. And I want you to help that by adding some music that'll make the audience feel that they have taken psychotropic drugs as well as those given to the prisoners, and they're part of the picture." So this is just a little taste of using high strings, piccolo, harpsichord, and creating the ugliest, sick music I could think of doing. And as a result, I got some wonderful reviews by some of the more snobbish critics of the time that said I was a wonderful avant-garde composer. And having written nothing but melody, harmony, and counterpoint since I was a teenager, I couldn't agree with that nice statement. But it did, I think, fit the film and was helpful. And if we could have the wonderful gentleman who's running the video, thank heavens, we could play the very first one. I was so carried away giving the philosophy of that piece. That sounds like it's part of it. That was actually the opening credits, and the reason why it was so melodic was I tried to think of where I worked for Shakespeare in the Park and all of the Shakespeare plays where fate and the Greek tragedies where fate doomed the most noble of characters by the fact that he was a doomed man. So Lawrence Harvey, who played this wonderful, gentle, honest, decent person, was the most brainwashed of anybody. And if you've probably seen the film. And therefore, I wanted to show that he still was a beautiful person. And also, before I wrote that, John said, "Save the weird music for when it gets weird." He said, "Just remember 2 things, and I'll pass those on to all you filmmakers present. It's not a Chinese war movie. And the next thing, which he told me, and I would share with every composer, the film will tell you what to do." In other words,
So true. So true.
yeah. In other words, to pay attention to what it is you're writing for, which seems simplistic and elementary. The second part, we're just going to hear a little fraction of the horrible stuff that I did to make people feel that they were taking psychotropic drugs and maybe losing their brains. Also, the use of silence. That sometimes it was nice to have it stop and let the sound effects or the brain of the film person who's the audience take a breath as well. And this is just a little sample of that. This was the brainwashing scene, and this is the second one that's on that tape that we made. So watching it, when people saw it in the theater, in context of the whole film, it was really frightening. And there was a lot of other music in it as well. And if you do see the film, I hope that you enjoy it. But I tried to do exactly what John Frankenheimer said, which was, the film will tell you what to do. And also, I begged for silence between some of the musical effects so you didn't notice it particularly. Certainly none of that could have been made into a hit song, but that wasn't why I did the score. The next one is a more cheerful, sentimental nature for Splendor in the Grass, which I did a year earlier. That has more traditional music influenced by jazz and symphonic writing, where the counterpoint or various lines that I used were something that was made before Bach came on the scene, the 300 years of consort of viols, where everybody played a line. It was beautiful horizontally and beautiful vertically. Each line was melodic, and yet everything fit by the choice of notes. What we call purity of intent and an exquisite choice of notes. And I had the, I guess at that time considered to be naive idea that if I continued writing music all my life, maybe someday someone would see one of those films and I wouldn't have to apologize and say, well, I didn't write half of it myself. Someone else orchestrated the stuff that was stolen from someone's drawer. And I bypassed that whole temptation just to try to write good music. So when I hear it all these years later, I listen to it and say, boy, that kid did a good job. This is the beginning of Splendor in the Grass, and I tried to get kind of an American feeling of the 1920s when times were a little simpler. And this is the opening credits, and it's lyrical but bittersweet. And the one thing, just before we get that up, I was told by the Warner Brothers music publisher, who's now expired, so I certainly won't mention his name. He said, that's got too many chords, too many chord changes. It's never going to be a hit song. And I said, well, Mr. Kazan decided he wanted this to be the principal theme, and I have about 15 different versions of it, but that's not why I wrote it, and I don't want to change it. He kept saying, it's too complicated. And Kazan came in and terrified him by saying, I got him because he's not a hack, he's a young unknown, and I think he'll do a good job. Please don't interfere. So they left the music the way it was. He has passed on, and now the music itself gets played. I don't think that's any revenge. It's just that you're always given the temptation to do something that's less than you're supposed to even be hired to do, much less something you love yourself. And it's good to get corrections from the musicians and from people who are really, or the conductor, if someone else is conducting it, or the singer, or someone who's involved, or other composers who are involved in it that have a broader picture. And usually, you don't need that because the audience always tells you how you're doing. And when you have something, and after the 30 seconds you hear, you realize it may be very relaxing to listen to, but perhaps it's better to have a movement or they have a La Sonambula, the famous opera about the sleepwalker. That's a different thing. So this is the one from Splendor in the Grass. And I also, it's too late now to thank all the musicians that played on that, but as you can hear, that's one of the most seductive things about working in Hollywood, until you find that you can get great players everywhere who also will do the same thing. But there they get the best players, and most of them don't play even with the terrific symphony that they have. At least now they do it. The players do that. But at that time, they could become literally wealthy by just playing 5 or 6 record dates and film scores a year each day. So in the year they were making colossal amounts of money. So they got all the violinists had a Stradivarius or Guarnerius instrument, worth more than the house it would have cost at that time. It was just wonderful, and they played so well. And the people who recorded it could read scores, everything. The sound check was about 1.5 minutes. It was amazing, and it was such a joy to do that it was very tempting to say, "Boy, I'll stay there just to do the recording." But I had to give that up for a higher purpose. This is the other one I wanted to play just, again, for the filmmakers, or those of you, and anybody, incidentally, can be a filmmaker today on some level just by using one of these. And make your own film, put it up online for nothing. Get a friend of yours who works in a dry cleaning store that has a doctorate in acting and can't get a gig anywhere, and get a whole bunch of people who would love to do something. I'm working on a film now that I don't know if it's ever going to get shown. My son asked me to do it. He's in it, and I play his grandfather. And I figured, what could be more fun than that? But there are people who can make really professional films themselves. So if you have a great idea, do it. And don't be discouraged by people saying, there's no market for it, there's no distributors who will take that. You got to have more violence and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine too. And if it entertains people, God bless them all. But there's a lot of things you can do yourself. And we're going to hear a little bit of the music from one of those home movies called Pull My Daisy, which is now,
You were in that too.
Yeah,
You were the horn man.
That's right.
The French horn man.
Yeah, that's at the end of the periods. I make a stumble bum entrance as when I was 28. But this is the use of the solo instrument, the saxophone, and it was a scene where they showed the end of the boom followed by the depression, and in a very quick time they show a balloon, which is not in the film. We see saying 1928 and somebody blows it out, and then they show Pat Hingle, who's playing the well-to-do father who's wiped out just before he jumps out of a window and is discovered by his son. But the whole story is told in this case, because Ann said I did this fast editing so people could see all of that. I don't want to depress them, but I want them to see what the recession was like in a minute. And I think some of that real blues, funko, tenor saxophone would be the perfect answer. And here it is, the saxophone part from Splendor in the Grass towards the very end of the film, after all the joyous lyrical music. And finally, it was basically a home movie of a play that Jack Kerouac had put on 20-some years after he died, so he never got a chance to rewrite it or even see it done in the theater. It's a fragment of the third sequence, and third act, really, of his amazing play. And all Jack's narration was spontaneous. He was watching the film and I was playing the piano. And then I said, I'll put a score in afterwards so we could have some silence. But as we did at the first jazz poetry readings, I just played the whole time for him. And we could hear the use of jazz, which wasn't done that much in the 50s, of the song Pull My Daisy by Anita Ellis, who was the vocalist, finally retired after 40 years of torture, not dying from nicotine poisoning by playing in all those places. And we heard, you can hear her wonderful singing, did it in one take of the song. The lyrics were by Jack Kerouac, his road buddy Neil Cassidy and Allen Ginsberg, and I did the music. And this was used throughout the film in different forms. From Pull My Daisy, a 1959 film by Robert Frank, which was shown at the Museum of Modern Art for 2 weeks at this huge Robert Frank exhibit. And some panel of judges just included it as one of the 100 best documentary films of the 20th century. So those of us who were still alive all got together and wondered what those judges were smoking when they
Same thing you were.
made that choice. But at least we're glad that it got acknowledged. But frankly, everybody in this room that has an iPhone can make a better home movie than we did, and we had a good time. And Jack's genius at narrating and the wonderful cinematography of Robert Frank, and the fact that none of us were actors, which we proved by our non-performances, made it kind of charming cinema verite, American style, although at the time we were just having a huge party for 3 weeks, and someone edited 50 hours of clowning around into what might have been a fairly good grade Z home movie, but which, with Jack's narration, made it actually something interesting. This is Pull My Daisy. The final thing is a part of the movie when they wanted to have a character that Jack called Mez McGillicuddy make his entrance into the film, the deranged French horn player. I said, I could do that.
And you did.
He said, but I said, you don't have any Irish people in the film. He said, well, that's why we got you. I said, you're I'm a Sephardic Jew from Philadelphia, not an Irish. That doesn't matter. Just be you. This was Stanislavski before we knew there was such a thing. So here's an example. If you're in a film directing it, do what Alfred Hitchcock did and be in it.
Absolutely.
And this is the last one, then I'll have a few questions. I'm sure you want to ask Barbara a few questions. I always do. And then if there's any time left over, I'll play you something.
Yes.
We just, another one's only 1 minute and 34 seconds. I forgot. That was the one that was supposed to be playing then, but in spite of spending 7 hours preparing this, I goofed up. So the one before that, which is C2, is the bishop's entrance. And this was supposed to be 18th century elegance in a shabby environment, because the bishop and his wife came in to have a dinner party like normal people would do in the 50s. And a bunch of ruffians, which is all of us, came and were such a drag that she threw us all out of her place. A taste of culture, or lack of culture, of the 1950s. And I used the oboe player who played in the New York Philharmonic, and a violist who played in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, and the marvelous bassoon player Jane Taylor, who played in the New York Woodwind Quintet, and the great Sahib Shahab, who was a fantastic saxophonist and played piano and horn myself. This was the music that was almost neoclassical or classical, because Jack his favorite composer was Bach, and he loved that music as much as he loved jazz and Charlie Parker and the music of that period. So here it would be C number 2, and I apologize. I jumped the cue if you got it there.
Great. I was also wondering, of all the people that you've worked with, was there one or two that had the deepest impression on you?
Oh, I would say certainly Dimitri Mitropoulos. Some of you or your grandparents would remember him. He was the conductor of the New York Philharmonic. And I met him when I was, I guess, 13, 14 years old. And he was coming with the man that he was with to escape from the rigors of the symphony world. He was guest conducting the Philadelphia Orchestra. He wasn't yet the conductor of the Philharmonic. And he was so generous and so giving and so open and so warm and so encouraging for no reason except that he was that way with everybody. And also Charlie Parker, whom I met in 1952. And while he certainly was not a model for healthful living, he was fantastic in terms of encouraging anybody and everybody to do what they felt or dreamed maybe that they were put here to do, and encouraged hundreds, if not thousands, of people of all varieties of music, not just jazz, all varieties of music, and people who wanted to be artists, poets, painters, astronauts, bus drivers, whatever they felt like doing, to do it and to try to do a good job. And those were two people that I think about just about every day. And then people like Barbara Kopple, whom I'm sure you remember, because she's right here. Every time I see her at a concert or any place, she always has that beam and that life force that makes you realize there's somebody that loves their work and wants and is in that frame of mind of doing something creative, overcoming all odds and coming out like a champ. So I'm happy just to be in your presence.
Thank you. All right, you want to play something for them?
Sure, but somebody, would somebody like to just ask a question for, yes, sir?
I came in a couple minutes late, so forgive me if you covered this, but as you're talking, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm a Star Wars guy, Rocky, John Williams, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Superman, Indiana Jones, Rocky, Gonna Fly Now. It's just all coming to me right here, and to a lesser extent, my favorite movie, Buffalo Gal's gonna come out tonight, and the great Leon Gaft with the Grateful Dead movie, that opening. As a Deadhead, I know he worked with Jerry, but man, I can hear it right now. So I would say that without the composer, this room and this film festival are storytellers and people who love stories. Without the composer and the music, there is no motion picture, and there's no motion picture industry, I would argue.
Well, I'll let Barbara answer that because she was responsible for everything that you see. My responsibility as the composer was to do a little bit to try to enhance what I was there. Billy Collins, the great poet, told me, he said, David, I've enjoyed playing with you, but he said, I hardly ever use musicians to accompany me because the music is already in the poetry. So your job is to
It's correct.
enhance or accompany or complement what's already there, not demolish it and wipe it out. That's I guess for certain real estate mentality, but that's not what art's about. It's not like conquering and ripping up the soil and destroying everything to enrich yourself. It's to put something beautiful that's there. It's just part of the whole. But you do the whole, so you.
I agree, but I want you to play something for them, if you would.
Let's see. We're going to end right on the dot to show my respect for this wonderful festival and their whole schedule, not by going overtime.
Right.
And then we'll be in the back. If you want to hang out and talk, we can do that for indefinitely. Well, I'll play two very brief things so we can, if I'm looking at my wrist, it's not because I'm fascinated by my wrist, but just to see that I don't go 1 second overtime. Because in the symphony world, they end right on the spot. but they start right on the spot. And sometimes in the jazz, Latin, Native American, and folk scene, you starts whenever. At that point, it changes to whatever. And you just keep going until everybody's either asleep or left, or you're told, please leave the place, we have to go to work. This is Splendor in the Grass, as Kazan heard it, bare bones on the piano. Asha. Thank you. And in my remaining 4 minutes and 46 seconds, I'd like to play an abbreviated version of Pull My Daisy.
We would love that.
As it's developed over the years from its very short version that you heard to an interminable, lengthy one, and bilingual one, but I'll spare you all that. Pull my daisy, tip my cup, all my doors are open. Hop my heart for coconuts, all my eggs are broken. Harp my heart song, harp my light, and seraphs hold me steady. Hip my angel, harp my light, lay it on the needy. Harp my heart song, harp my light, and seraphs hold me steady. Hip my angel, harp my light, lay it on the needy. Well, when Jack and Neil and I wrote that way back in 1959, we never thought we'd be here at the Woodstock Festival with all of you and Barbara Kopple feeling just so fine. So we're glad you're here to spread the cheer, and even the feedback is near. But don't let it bother you anyway. That's part of the noise that accompanies music when it does play. You get used to it each and every day. And Jack learned to do that too. So when we say pull my daisy, we're speaking about the creativity in all of you. So if you want it right, or play and sing, or just stay at home and do your thing, don't be discouraged by people who say no, because that's the only place where they know how to go. Just be creative, because we're all being creative till we're tucked out of it. Don't you know that's the way society does say you're washed up today? So we hate to rush off like this, but we do not wish to be remiss and go overtime at the festival and throw it off key. So we'll only say that we want to thank, as they say in the Quaker areas close to where I was born to in Feasterville, Pennsylvania. We thank all of ye. In the remaining minute and 45 seconds, I'd like to say thank you so much to the festival for the wonderful work that you're doing, and all of you being here.